What if I told you that some of the most dangerous criminals in America have continued their reign of terror even from behind bars? Inside Pelican Bay State Prison, the walls hold stories of power, fear, and unimaginable control. Inmates locked in solitary cells, yet their reach extends far beyond. These are the top 5 most dangerous Mexican Mafia members in the prison's history. Their influence and actions have left a lasting impact in ways that few could ever comprehend. Pelican Bay State Prison, known as one of the most secure and isolated facilities in the United States, serves as a fortress for housing some of the most violent and influential criminals in history. This prison was built not just to confine individuals, but to contain the operations of gang leaders, whose control extends across cities, neighborhoods, and even other prisons. The Mexican Mafia, one of the most feared and organized prison gangs, holds a unique and powerful position within this system. They've influenced street-level crime, orchestrated movements behind locked doors, and maintained control over countless illegal activities. Today, we're taking a closer look at 5 individuals whose actions have shaped this shadowy underworld. From number 5, the least dangerous, to number 1, the most infamous, their stories reveal a level of influence and power that few could imagine possible. Let's begin. Aruro Castellanos began his life in Mexicali, Mexico, a place where opportunities were scarce and challenges came early. His family relocated to Los Angeles when he was just a baby, hoping for a better future. Instead, the streets of Los Angeles would shape his upbringing, steering him toward a path that would eventually lead to notoriety. As he grew older, Castellanos became entrenched in the harsh realities of gang life. By his early 20s, he had risen to prominence within Florida 13, a street gang infamous for its size, structure, and ruthless reputation. At 27, Castellanos' violent tendencies came to the forefront during a deadly altercation at the Lettuce Patch Lounge, a bar frequented by locals. What began as an exchange of words quickly turned into a brutal confrontation. Mark Vasquez, a young man in his early 20s, and his friends had made comments that Castellanos found disrespectful. When tensions flared, Castellanos responded with a level of violence that shocked witnesses. In the heat of the moment, he attacked Vasquez, stabbing him 12 times, ensuring the injuries were fatal. When the bar owner, Tito Lechuga, attempted to intervene, Castellanos turned on him as well, slashing his throat with precision. Vasquez succumbed to his wounds later that night, and Lechuga's efforts to defuse the situation cost him his life. These crimes led to Castellanos being convicted of 2 counts of second-degree murder. The sentence handed down, 21 years to life, would see him confined to California's most secure prison. But for Castellanos, incarceration did not mean the end of his influence. Upon entering Pelican Bay State Prison, he was placed under the strictest confinement conditions, isolated to prevent him from exerting any further control over Florencia 13. Yet, despite living under constant surveillance, he managed to maintain his grip on the gang. His communication was limited, his mail was monitored, and personal interactions were heavily restricted. But using coded messages and indirect channels, he continued to issue directives, ensuring that his authority remained intact. From his cell, he oversaw gang operations, a reality that both frustrated and challenged law enforcement officials. In his later years, Castellanos prepared for what he knew was inevitable. Diagnosed with stomach cancer, he understood that his time was limited. Before his death, he left behind a note, a final testament to his dedication to Florencia 13. The note contained precise instructions for the gang's younger members, emphasizing the importance of leadership and continuity. Castellanos wanted to ensure that the gang would not falter after his passing. To him, loyalty to the organization mattered more than anything else, and he sought to solidify that loyalty even in his absence. This message, simple yet commanding, demonstrated the unwavering hold he maintained over the gang, even as his health deteriorated. The impact of Castellanos' actions extended far beyond the walls of Pelican Bay. Families in Los Angeles neighborhoods lived with the consequences of the violence orchestrated under his leadership. Communities struggled to rebuild in the wake of gang activity that left scars both physical and emotional. law enforcement faced an uphill battle in dismantling the systems Castellanos had helped establish. Systems that continued to operate long after he was isolated. By the time he succumbed to his illness, Castellanos had spent over 30 years in prison, much of it under the most restrictive conditions available. His passing brought an end to a life defined by violence, control, and unwavering allegiance to a gang that viewed him as a central figure. Even in death, the legacy he left behind, both in Florencia 213 and in the communities affected by its actions, served as a stark reminder of the enduring reach of organized crime. Castellanos' story is one of power sustained under circumstances designed to suppress it, a testament to the influence one individual can wield, even from behind the steel doors of solitary confinement. Number 4 on this list is Michael Torres. Michael Torres was born in the San Fernando Valley in 1964, a region marked by stark contrasts between vibrant communities and the darker undercurrents of gang life. From an early age, Torres found himself drawn to the streets where survival often depended on loyalty, strength, and a willingness to act decisively. His connections to the underworld deepened when he became associated with Luis Guaro Boff Flores, one of the founding members of the Mexican Mafia. This relationship would not only shape Torres' trajectory, but also cement his place as a key figure in the Mexican Mafia's criminal empire. By the early 1990s, Torres had risen to prominence within the organization, earning the nickname Mosca. His primary role was as a tax collector, a position that gave him authority over drug sales throughout the San Fernando Valley. In this capacity, Torres controlled the flow of money generated from countless illegal transactions. Dealers, gang members, and even local criminals operating in the area were all required to pay their dues, ensuring a steady stream of income for the Mexican Mafia. Refusal or defiance was not an option, and those who dared to challenge Torres faced severe consequences. One such example was the case of David Diablo Mendoza, a man who had been accused of extorting drug dealers and prostitutes by falsely claiming membership in the Mexican Mafia. Torres saw this as a direct affront to the organization's authority. On June 12, 2003, Torres arrived at an apartment in North Hills where Mendoza was staying. When Mendoza approached the door, Torres asked him a simple but loaded question: "Are you a carnal?" a term reserved for full-fledged members of the Mexican Mafia. Mendoza lifted his shirt to reveal his tattoos and claimed to be a member. Without hesitation, Torres pulled out a gun and shot him in the chest. Mendoza stumbled back, clutching his wound, and managed to utter, "These guys just shot me," before collapsing onto a couch. And he later died from his injuries. The violence didn't end there. Following the shooting, Torres ordered his men to abduct Joe "Smokey" Neria, another gang member who had been involved in a dispute over the events leading up to Mendoza's murder. Smokey was kidnapped, beaten, strangled with a rope, and stabbed with a screwdriver. Despite the brutal attack, Smokey managed to escape. When Torres was arrested later that year, investigators uncovered a trove of evidence that painted a chilling picture of his operations. At his mother's modest home in San Fernando, authorities found bundles of cash hidden in a crawl space, along with an additional $6,000 tucked inside a coffee pot. But it wasn't just the money that drew attention. Among Torres' possessions was a detailed reading list that revealed a darker side to his intellect. Titles included the complete, uncensored edition of The Anarchist's Cookbook, Gray's Anatomy, and a guide titled "Get Anyone to Do Anything and Never Feel Powerless Again." This selection of books hinted at a calculated and methodical approach to his role within the Mexican Mafia, where knowledge and psychological manipulation were just as important as brute force. Despite his relatively limited education, Torres had only completed the 5th grade. He demonstrated a sharp mind and a strategic ability to navigate the complexities of the gang world. When charged, Torres chose to represent himself in court, a decision that allowed him to remain in Men's Central Jail for an extended period. This was not a mere coincidence. Witnesses later revealed that Torres intentionally prolonged his stay because he was collecting a substantial amount of money from drug sales within the jail. His time in custody became yet another avenue for power and profit, But Torres' story is far from the end of this hierarchy of control. The influence he wielded was immense, yet what he achieved pales in comparison to the next figure in this countdown. While Torres thrived in the shadows, the individual ranked above him redefined what it means to lead from within the confines of Pelican Bay State Prison. Number 3 on this list is Danny Roman, a name that reverberated through the streets of South Central Los Angeles and far beyond. Roman's path to power within the Mexican Mafia was not an overnight ascent. Born into an environment rife with challenges, he became involved with street gangs at an early age. Over time, he demonstrated not only loyalty but also a strategic mind, which earned him respect and recognition within the organization. By the time he reached the height of his influence, Roman was not just a member, he was a leader whose reach extended deep into the gang world. Roman's role within the Mexican Mafia was one of immense power and authority. He held sway over numerous street gangs in South Central Los Angeles, using them as extensions of the organization's influence. These gangs were not just loyal to Roman, they were dependent on his directives. Under his leadership, a network of criminal activities flourished, including drug trafficking, extortion, and violent enforcement of gang rules. But Roman's leadership wasn't limited to maintaining order within the gang. He was also responsible for orchestrating racial violence, which left entire communities on edge and law enforcement scrambling to respond. Murders, drive-by shootings, and acts of intimidation became tools he wielded with precision. One of the most significant aspects of Roman's leadership was his ability to manage South Central Los Angeles as if it were a kingdom. The gang territories under his command were closely monitored, with rules enforced by members who knew the consequences of disobedience. Roman's control was not just about fear, it was about creating an environment where loyalty to him and the Mexican Mafia came above all else. The gangs under his influence knew that Roman's word was law, and defying it could result in dire consequences. For years, Roman managed to evade the full grasp of law enforcement. He employed strategies that kept his operations running smoothly while avoiding direct exposure to capture. He rarely communicated in ways that could be traced, relying instead on coded messages and trusted intermediaries to relay his orders. These measures allowed him to stay one step ahead of the authorities, even as they worked tirelessly to bring him down. However, his tactics were not foolproof. Even after being confined to Pelican Bay State Prison's security housing unit, Roman's influence remained significant. The isolation was designed to cut him off from the outside world, but Roman found ways to circumvent these restrictions. Through covert communications, he continued to guide and direct the gangs under his control. His ability to maintain influence, despite being physically removed from his network, became a testament to the power he wielded and the fear he commanded. Danny Roman's story is one of power, violence, a struggle between law enforcement and organized crime. He rose to prominence within one of the most feared organizations in the prison system, managed terrors that spanned entire neighborhoods, and directed violence that had far-reaching consequences. Coming in at number 2 is Rene Boxer Enriquez, a name that carries both power and controversy within the world of the Mexican Mafia. Born on July 7, 1962 in the small city of Artesia, California, Enriquez grew up in a turbulent environment. Like many who would later join the Mexican Mafia, his early years were marked by struggles and exposure to street life. As a teenager, he became deeply involved with gangs, quickly earning a reputation for his charisma and willingness to do whatever it took to earn respect. It wasn't long before Enriquez caught the attention of high-ranking members of the Mexican Mafia, setting him on a path toward infamy. Enriquez's rise through the ranks of the Mexican Mafia was swift and brutal. Once inducted into the organization, he became a trusted figure within the gang, taking on tasks that others might have hesitated to accept. His willingness to carry acts of extreme violence, coupled with his strategic thinking, made these weren't random acts of violence. They were calculated moves intended to maintain the Mafia's dominance both inside and outside prison walls. One of the most infamous incidents involving Enriquez occurred in 1991. along with another man, Enriquez attacked Salvador Monbuenrostro, a fellow Mexican Mafia leader. In a lawyer's interview room at the Los Angeles County Jail, armed with makeshift weapons, Enriquez and his accomplice stabbed Buenrostro 26 times, leaving him critically injured. Remarkably, Buenrostro survived, but the attack sent a clear message. Betrayal or perceived weakness within the organization would not be tolerated. For years, Enriquez was a cornerstone of the Mexican Mafia's operations. His influence extended far beyond the confines of any single prison, and his reputation as both a leader and enforcer was cemented. But in 2003, everything changed. Enriquez made a decision that shocked both his allies and his enemies. He defected from the Mexican Mafia and became a federal witness. This decision marked a turning point. Enriquez's defection was more than a betrayal. It was a seismic shift that exposed the inner workings of the Mexican Mafia to law enforcement. In exchange for his cooperation, Enriquez provided invaluable information about the gang's structure, operations, and members. His testimony led to numerous convictions and severely disrupted the Mafia's activities. However, this decision came at a tremendous personal cost. Enriquez became a marked man, with his former allies vowing to take his life at the first opportunity. The government recognized the danger Enriquez faced and took extraordinary measures to protect him. At one point, he was booked into custody under a false name and charged with possession of a swordfish without a license. Despite living under constant threat, Enriquez continued to assist law enforcement, giving lectures to officers and even teaching an online course about major prison gangs. His transformation from a high-ranking gang member to a key witness was both remarkable and polarizing. The betrayal Enriquez's former comrades felt was profound. For an organization built on loyalty and secrecy, his defection represented the ultimate act of disloyalty. Yet Enriquez has expressed no regret for his decision, stating that his involvement in the Mexican Mafia had taken an irreparable toll on his life and the lives of others. Even now, he lives under constant protection, knowing that the threats against him will likely never fade. Rene Bolin, Enriquez's story is one of violence, power, and ultimately redemption on his own terms. But it is also a cautionary tale about the cost of loyalty to an organization that thrives on fear and control. As influential as Enriquez was, the individual ranked at number 1 on this list took the Mexican Mafia's reach and influence to an entirely different level. What you are about to hear will reveal the depths of what it means to wield power from within the walls of Pelican Bay State Prison. At the top of this list, at number 1, is Aruro Castellanos, a man whose name became synonymous with control, violence, and an unrelenting grip on power. Castellanos' rise to prominence within the Mexican Mafia began long before he was confined to Pelican Bay State Prison. His early criminal activities were marked by his involvement in Florencia 13, or F-13, a notorious gang in Los Angeles with deep connections to the Mexican Mafia. Castellanos didn't just participate in criminal operations, he led with precision and authority, cementing his position as a leader whose influence could not be ignored. Florencia 13 was not just any street gang, it was one of the largest and most organized, operating as an extension of the Mexican Mafia's reach. Under Castellanos' leadership, 13 became a force that dictated the rules of the streets, engaging in turf wars that left a trail of bloodshed and fear. One of the most devastating examples of this was a series of racial conflicts orchestrated under Castellanos' command. These turf wars, fueled by a desire to assert dominance and eliminate competition, resulted in the deaths of over 20 people. Communities were left shattered, with families mourning the loss of loved ones and neighborhoods living under a constant cloud of intimidation and violence. Even after Castellanos was incarcerated, his power remained unshaken. Sent to Pelican Bay State Prison and confined within its high-security housing units, he adapted to his circumstances with startling efficiency. Castellanos relied on a method known as kites, tiny scraps of paper containing coded messages that were smuggled in and out of the prison. These messages allowed him to continue directing gang operations, issuing orders for violence, drug trafficking, and extortion. His ability to command such an extensive network from a solitary cell revealed a level of determination and resourcefulness that law enforcement struggled to counter. Despite being under constant surveillance, Castellanos managed to make his presence felt in ways that extended beyond criminal activity. In 2011, he became one of the key figures behind a massive hunger strike organized by inmates in Pelican Bay. The strike, which lasted 3 weeks and involved thousands of prisoners across California, was a protest against the harsh conditions of solitary confinement. Castellanos and a few other high-ranking inmates were seen as the masterminds of this unprecedented demonstration, using their influence to rally inmates in a unified demand for better treatment. This act of defiance not only highlighted his leadership, but also forced the prison system to confront the inhumane conditions within its facilities. For the communities affected by Castellanos and his network, the impact of his actions was profound. Families were torn apart by the violence his gang unleashed. Neighborhoods lived in fear of retaliation or being caught in the crossfire of conflicts they had no part in. For law enforcement, dismantling the structures Castellanos built proved to be an uphill battle. Even in confinement, his ability to adapt and maintain control served as a reminder of how deeply rooted the Mexican Mafia's influence could be. Aruro Castellanos' story is not just one of crime and punishment. It is a story of the far-reaching consequences of unchecked power. His actions left an indelible mark on the lives of countless people, from the victims of gang violence to the families left grieving their losses. As the leader of 13 and a high-ranking figure within the Mexican Mafia, Castellanos exemplified the complexities of a system where power could thrive even in the most restrictive environments. His legacy, though built on fear and violence, serves as a stark warning of the challenges posed by organized crime, both inside and outside the prison system. Each individual, from number 5 to number 1, represented a unique level of danger, power, and control. Starting with Michael Torres at number 5, we saw how his role as a tax collector turned the San Fernando Valley into a hub for extortion and violence, all while orchestrating brutal retribution against anyone who defied him. At number 4, Danny Roman demonstrated how deeply entrenched the Mexican Mafia was in south-central Los Angeles. His leadership over street gangs and his ability to direct racial conflicts left entire communities living in fear, even as he worked to avoid capture. Then there was Rene Bolin at number 3, whose rise to a high-ranking position came at the cost of countless lives and acts of brutality. His eventual defection and decision to cooperate with law enforcement brought a new layer of complexity to his story, as it exposed the inner workings of an organization that thrives on secrecy and loyalty. And finally, at number 1, we uncovered the story of Aruro Castellanos, a man whose leadership within the Florencia 13 gang and his connection to the Mexican Mafia left a trail of devastation in his wake. From racial turf wars to his ability to command operations from solitary confinement, Castellanos' legacy is one that continues to be felt across California. His organization of a statewide hunger strike was a testament to the influence he maintained even under the most restrictive conditions. The stories of these individuals are not just tales of crime and punishment. They reveal the complexity of a system that allows power to flourish even within the confines of prison walls. Each figure in this countdown shaped the lives of those around them in ways that cannot be undone. Families were left grieving, communities struggled to recover, and the ripple effects of their actions continue to challenge law enforcement and society as a whole. The Mexican Mafia's grip on Pelican Bay may have weakened, but the legacy of violence they left behind still casts a long shadow over California's streets. The question now is, which of these stories shocked you the most? Was it the calculated acts of revenge, the secret operations carried out from solitary cells, or the sheer scale of the violence they unleashed? Let us know in the comments below. And if you found this deep dive into the lives of these dangerous individuals compelling, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to hit the bell icon so you never miss an update. We'll be back soon with more true crime stories that uncover the hidden truths behind some of history's most infamous figures.